So I'm James McQuivey, glad to be with you here today, and glad to sit here and watch the tweets from yesterday so I can catch up on what I missed. I apologize I couldn't be here with you, but it looks like it was fabulous. So my goal is to meet that expectation and maybe add to it if I can. What I want to do is first educate you a little bit on something that you certainly know. You've heard the word disruption before. What I want to do is fill in some of the gaps in what you perhaps understand about digital disruption, specifically as it compares to the old use of the word disruption. And by old, I mean maybe last month or even just a couple years ago, to go back no further than that. Because disruption, as we've known it for a long time, is accelerating. And that's happening in ways that all of us are experiencing. I'm going to illustrate that for you with examples that I think you'll find very close to home. Let's start, for example, in a bank branch. This has got to be one of the most unusual business models in the history of the world. Think about it. You give your money to someone, and then you go stand in line patiently to touch it. I mean, that is a very odd business, and they make billions having you do this. Of course, it's what they do with your money while they're holding it and while you're waiting in line for it that makes them the millions or billions that they make. But from a customer's perspective, you have always been an afterthought in this experience. And I remember as a child, my mother took me into the bank. You know, I'm old, so we actually had to fill out deposit slips and had to keep track in our little booklet of what balance we had. There was no such thing as an electronic account that we could tap into online. There was no online. Okay, fine, I'm that old. All right. From that experience, someone as early as the 1970s said, we could automate this. We could make a machine that would make this experience more satisfying. And so they invented the cash machine. And the cash machine was a boon. I remember it. I remember being so excited to get my first card to swipe in or stick into the machine and help me access my money more effectively. The thing about this technology invasion of the banking experience is that it really didn't change the experience much. It didn't change the product hardly at all. If you think about it, all it was an electronic teller. Automated teller machine is what it stands for. It was an electronic teller. All that did was make it slightly more convenient for you. Of course, that took years before they had enough of these machines in enough places, and they got good enough at making them work all the time and not always have out of order on the screen. So it took a long time before this actually changed the way you experienced anything, but it really only gave you an added convenience. There was nothing you could do at this machine that you couldn't have done in the bank branch under banking hours, which was already a problem to begin with. But add to this that from the bank's perspective, this didn't do much for them either. Each one of these machines in today's dollars cost about $180,000 in the late 1970s. Not to mention the fact that the networking had to be invented from scratch. User design? Come on, there wasn't any. Let's be honest. All of this had to be built up over decades, and it cost billions of dollars. That's why it took 20 years before the ATM was common here in the United States and even longer elsewhere. Now, I want you to fast forward to today, something that we do quite frequently, some of you maybe regularly. Oddly enough, you get a paper check. What do you do with that paper check? You take a picture of it. That check is deposited immediately, or depending on your bank, you might have a delay. And you don't even have to take that paper check to an ATM. You don't have to take it to the bank. You do that in the moment that you get the check. Now, this experience, if you think about it in contrast to the ATM, how much money did the bank have to invest in those machines? Nothing. We paid for them. How much money did the bank have to invest in the networking technology to make sure that we were connected to the internet in a secure mode? Nothing really. They, yes, did have to invest one time in their own technology behind the scenes as their connection to the internet. And yes, it's a big deal to develop that app, but you build that app once. Of course, you have to refresh it every week, but you build that app once, and you can put it in the hands of millions of customers quite literally. Very different cost model than the technology disruption that the ATM supposedly represented. Therefore, it accelerates. So disruption in the old days was, let's take some technology and let's do an old thing in a new way. And as a result of that change, we will marginally improve the experience to the customer and not even touch our business. Now, however, by putting your app in my phone, in my pocket, I am theoretically carrying my bank with me everywhere I go. And in that circumstance, that bank now has the chance to change not only my experience of depositing a check or moving some money around, but my relationship with the bank. It's not just this narrow exchange of transactional behaviors at a window or at a teller. It is now a potentially ongoing relationship that expands my notion of what it is to interact with a bank and expands the bank's notion of what it is to interact with a customer. This very short story encapsulates all of digital disruption. It's cheaper to do. It's easier to do. It scales faster. It has a transformative effect on your entire product, not just the customer's user experience. But here's the coda. Sure, great that the banks can finally wake up and build a better customer-focused experience. That's wonderful, but let's see. These tools are so easy to use and build. The access to the customer is so cheap and easy. Anybody can do it. I don't even have to be a bank to get into a banking relationship with a customer. I can simply give them the opportunity to send an email to someone with the subject line $35 and copy cash@square.com, and within minutes my money is transferred from my bank, whatever bank it is, to that person's bank, whatever bank that is. And suddenly the bank, which thinks we've got him, he is in our customer database, doesn't even realize that they've lost the relationship. That the relationship is now seeping out to this company that has no regulatory burden whatsoever, no massive infrastructure, no banking charter, but is now taking millions of customer relationships away with barely the lift of a pinky finger, comparatively speaking. It's got all the things that digital has going for it. It's potentially viral in that I invite my friends to do it by sending them money. We've done this now to our kids' piano teacher, our piano tuner. Piano's a big thing in our life, I'm just realizing. We're doing this to, I pay my son his allowance this way. Which should terrify Bank of America because both of our accounts are Bank of America accounts. And in theory, I should pull out my phone, launch the app. Oh, it takes so long. Log in. Oh, that takes so long. Go to the menu that says transfer, find my account, find his account, and give him his $40. I won't tell you $40 for how much period of time because I don't want you to either love me or hate me, either way. But $40, well, all I do is I pull out my phone and I send him an email. Or lately, all I do is say, okay, Google, send email to Logan, subject $40. And then it goes to my phone and I just add cash@square.com and it goes. In a couple of minutes, without Bank of America even realizing that that relationship that they have with me is gone. Because the experience that this company provides to accomplish what I need to get done is better. It becomes that simple. Digital disruption is a means whereby we give people what they already want. It's not about inventing new things. The classic examples these days are Uber and Airbnb. Perfect examples. People already wanted that stuff. No, you didn't want to stay with some cat lady in Pomona, California. That's not consciously what you wanted. But when presented with the range of options available to you at a certain price and within a certain proximity, and so easily identified on your phone in a moment's need, that is what you ended up wanting. That's what digital disruption is doing. So we want to make sure we're part of this, rather than standing by on the sidelines and letting it happen to us. In order for that to happen, we need to be explicit about what used to stop this kind of thing. Now, I've been in this business 16 years, I guess. And I remember in the late 90s counseling very large companies, automakers, healthcare. Think of the banks. Think of the most rooted types of industries. And I was telling them this internet thing is going to be a big deal. Trust me. That's all I had at that point was trust. I mean, we had surveys of hundreds of thousands of US consumers and then eventually global consumers about what they wanted to do with this technology. But at the time, go back to 1998 when I started, I was trying to tell them, this is going to change everything. And their answers to me were very, very simple. First of all, people will never do that. I actually got that answer from a bank in the Midwest in 1999. People will never bank online. Now, if you say it that way, bank online, sure they won't. But if you say it in a way that acknowledges what's really going on in there, people will never manage their financial needs and interests using a convenient technology that they carry with them in their pocket or maybe is sitting at a desk at home. Suddenly you realize how absurd it is to say that. But they said it, and I got that from every industry. People will never do that. In the few cases where they said people might do that, but it'll cost too much to do. The great thing about digital disruption, and here's where I'm here to update your understanding of the word disruption, these things no longer apply. Because in fact, the last remaining obstacle to digital disruption is that we don't know how to disrupt ourselves. That's really it. This is simple human knowledge, human systems. Dave Gray's session yesterday was a perfect intro to this kind of thinking. This is just about what we're capable of marshaling our resources to accomplish. It's not about the amount of the resources or the likely behavior on the output of what we accomplish. It's we don't know how. So what I want to do is bring us up to speed on digital disruption, give us a couple of thoughts, 3 steps that I'll share with you. Those of you who decide to hang around a little later on, it's so unfair of me, I get to plug my workshop this afternoon. No one else gets to do that. If you hang around with the workshop later on, we'll go into it in some more detail. But for now, I want to just talk about a few things, starting with how digital disruptors operate. Now, I like to describe them as being better, stronger, and faster. And I purely use those 3 words because I'm a huge Bionic Man fan. Anybody else? No? Thank you. You know, actually, I started with these words at a meeting a while ago, and someone said, "Oh, it's a Kanye West song." I said, "Stop it! You out of the room right now." This is Steve Austin, the Bionic Man. He was better, stronger, and faster. He cost $6 million. That's why he was called the $6 million man. The point about that whole TV show, and those of you who never have heard of this show, I'm so sorry, but the point of that whole TV show is that they could invest a little bit of technology to make this man superhuman. The cool thing about digital disruption is that we invest far less than $6 million to make each one of us superhuman. The fact that you're carrying in your pockets a technology that has more than the combined computing power of the entire Apollo space mission computing technology is pretty impressive. You are better, stronger, and faster. But digital disruptors are better, stronger, and faster in 3 specific ways. Number 1, they build better product experiences. I will define that phrase later on. Those experiences create stronger customer relationships. Remember, I foreshadowed this when I was talking about what Square Cash is doing to the banks. And in the end, because they're using the technology wisely, they bring it all to market faster than anybody else could or will. So the only way to beat these people is to join them. Now, you're in this room because you already think like this, so that's great. This is a big pat on the back. But let's make sure you've got it down. Let's take you back to the fact that each one of you, regardless of industry, regardless of profession and role, can and will do this by respecting the economics of digital disruption. The economics. Econ 101. Okay, I don't want to lose you. I know some of you skipped Econ on purpose. It's time to come back. Econ 101 with a twist. Those of you who are familiar with the work of Clay Christensen at Harvard Business School, the guy's a genius. He wrote the book, The Innovator's Dilemma. He's the one that popularized the term disruption. So I'm paying homage to that and building on it when I say this. He was kind enough to actually read my manuscript before he published it. Gave me some great input. So I'm not saying anything that contradicts him at all. I'm building. But let me say how quickly we need to build. Because under old disruption, the economics of old disruption were such that very few people could participate. It required massive amounts of capital for them to get even the smallest number of ideas out into the market. Now, these could be important ideas. Jet engines, MRI machines, you name it, good stuff that we benefit from today. But all came from the hands of a very few individuals. The economics of digital disruption are completely reverse of that. What we have is a scenario in which hundreds and then thousands and hundreds of thousands and ultimately hundreds of millions of people can participate. Each of them operating at a much lower cost per individual and per idea than they ever could have before. If you doubt that, spend any time on Kickstarter at all. Any time on Kickstarter at all. And what you will see is the result of all of this, an explosion of ideas. Some of them huge. WhatsApp has more than 500 million friends right now. And it's only a couple of years old. It was a very small idea that has gone like this. Some of the ideas on Kickstarter are small and will stay small. Some of them are just dumb. But that's the way it's supposed to work. We're supposed to have a free-flowing economy of ideas which can then be easily and rapidly converted into experiences and products. All the way from 3D printable products down to pure software experiences. This whole range of experiences which are being pioneered by these ultimately millions of people. If we for now just try to put some numbers on it, then I will. We're talking about at least 10 times the number of people who are engaged in this today, thanks to digital. Each of them operating at about 1/10 the cost. I have some good case studies that validate this completely. I've asked serial entrepreneurs about their last business to launch compared to their prior business to launch. And one gentleman who successfully sold 2 startups, one in the mid-90s and one in the early 2000s, first to Microsoft, and then I can't even remember who he sold the second one to, started a new company in 2009. I talked to him a couple years back and I said, what was the difference in cost? And he drew a line like this for me. And he said, oh, sorry, where are you? You're over, yeah, that's the line. He drew. He said it cost, just between the last business and this business, 1/10 as much. He needed $5 million to get started the last time. This last time he needed less than $500,000. He ran the company for 4 years with 4 people. They used their own cell phones. They used all open source server software. They pulled out a credit card and swiped it in order to use AWS as their server technology. This business now has over 20 million customers and 8 employees. He did have to add some staff. 1/10 the cost. So multiply, these are both order of magnitude differences. Now multiply those together and what you get is 2 orders of magnitude. 100 times the power. That's measured in number of ideas, power of those ideas, speed with which those ideas can multiply. That's digital disruption. That's the cool stuff that we're doing right now. And when I go work with a large, say, consumer electronics maker like I have to next week, and they're still stuck on what features should we add to our new digital SLR camera? And I'm saying that's a great engineering question, but man, you have to have answered that like 2 years ago. What you need to ask next is how do we expand the product experience around that digital SLR camera? Build a digital relationship with our users. Provide information back to them that makes the camera experience far more than just holding a device and clicking on a shutter. So it's the economics that drive this, not the lust for technology, although I suffer from that lust. But I promise you, this is not about technology. This is about economics, which makes it far more fundamental than most people want to believe. Because they think, oh, now that we've arrived at mobile, everyone knows mobile matters, we have a mobile team, we're done. So people like me are constantly pointing out there's this, there's that, there's virtual reality, there's wearables, there's all. Not because those devices will matter. They won't. It's the expansion of the digital connective thread between you and your customer. That's what's staring you in the face, and if you miss it, you will miss it. Okay, couple of steps as I promised. Number one, this one's the easiest one. I'm just here to make sure you know that you're joining a consumer already in progress here. Think about this. A couple of numbers I'll share with you. Right now we estimate there are at least 75 million Amazon customers around the world who have some kind of Amazon Kindle, either e-reader or tablet. They will not comment on that number, so I can't, it's a hard number to estimate, but let's just say 75 million. Now this number we know, it's public, Apple shares it with us gratefully, 225 million plus iPads that have been sold. If iPad Nation were a country, does anyone know? It will have just tied Brazil as the 5th largest country in the world this summer. Now it's not a country, that's comparing apples to, you get it. Anyway, the point is, even Microsoft is participating in this. 35 million, by the end of this year it should be over 40 million Kinect cameras, either version 1, this is version 1, or version 2 that came out last year with the Xbox One. Yes, that's a much smaller number than the iPad number, and that maybe tells us something. But the point is, all 3 of these companies are absolutely killing it compared to what was happening just a decade ago. Did you know that Apple took 2 years to sell 1 million iPods? If we compare the success of the iPod to the success of the iPad was 80 times more successful. And that is an apples-to-apples comparison. So the same company, a decade later, is able to make magic happen. No product category launch has ever been that successful in the history of the world. Now the interesting thing about all 3 of these devices is that they know their users. You cannot use them without logging in. You, in very rare cases, can get away with not giving a credit card, but why would you? What would be the point of having these relationships without having a method of payment connected to them? The connect is on here because it actually knows you before you ask it to know you. It sees you, it hears your voice, it logs you in. Every time I walk down to the basement and the kids are playing the Xbox, there's my login right there. It sees me, it knows who I am. Now you may or may not find that creepy, but the point is, consumers are there. They're building relationships, multiple overlapping relationships, not just with their bank app and Square, but with Apple and with Google. Well, maybe those two don't really mix very well. Let's just say Apple and Microsoft, or Apple and, no, Amazon. You know, you have these overlapping relationships in your life, and you are giving more opportunity to each of these companies every day to surprise and delight you. The opportunities are there. Step one, join the customer already in progress. All right, number two, how do you give them stuff that they're going to be delighted with? First of all, you need to generate more ideas than you're currently generating. Now, this is kind of a fun exercise. We're going to do a lot of this in the workshop later on today. I'll do this exercise I've done it with an auto parts manufacturer. Amazing. This was one I walked into expecting was going to completely fail, because what is left for them to do? It turns out a lot. And they had the ideas, they just needed to be able to structure it. So we spent time learning how to generate ideas by innovating the adjacent possible. Innovating the adjacent possible is a terrible term. I didn't invent it, but I totally owned it. Because Stephen Johnson, the gentleman who wrote the book, Where Good Ideas Come From, highly recommend this book. 400-year-long history of human ideas that leads you to the conclusion that the best human ideas happen through a process much like human evolution and animal evolution, which is adjacent possibilities. So that's where the term came from. It came from evolution to Stephen Johnson to James McQuivey. And what we did is we said, now, what if we were to use this not to look backward over the past and say, how did we get to where we are, but to look forward and say, how do we get to where we're going to be? Because I can guarantee you, if we put your customer in this circle and we say, all right, what does your customer need 5 years from now? And I've been to those brainstorms. I guarantee you, you won't know. You can't. They don't know, you don't know. You can take some good guesses, great. But a much better approach is to not say, where will they be 5 years from now? Just like evolution didn't say, what do I need to do in 5 million years from now? We say, where do we need to be right now with our customer, aware of their next possible move, their adjacent possibilities. And we ask ourselves, what do they want next? And then we start to figure out what they want next. And there we come up with a long list of things. It's amazing when you give people permission to just say, let's put the customer in the center of your experience and ask what they need next. I have never, ever had a company of any type around the world say to me, I can't think of anything. Can't think of anything our customer wants next. Usually they have a long list, but they never bring that list to work because they know the moment they do, they'll get accused of something. Well, that's not your responsibility. We can't afford that. We tried that before. Who do you think you are? That's political suicide. All of those things that you are told in any company, at least with some frequency, and in some companies with regular frequency, stop people from bringing that list of adjacent possibilities to work. Well, my job is to come in and say, I've been asked by your executives to let you give me that list. It gets long really fast. These people know what their customer needs next. Now, half of what they suggest we can't do. We really can't. You don't have the skill, you don't have the partnerships, you don't have the technology, you don't have the investment, fine. But never again have I come across a list where there isn't at least one or maybe two things on the list that you could do. Not only that you could do, but you could do right now. Right now. And here's the cool thing about adjacent possibilities. You start here in the middle, you step with your customer to this adjacent possibility, and then once you're here and you've built that for them, you immediately are in a new vantage point and you can see, oh, God, it looks like the next thing they need is this or that. And then you take that step with them. And then another step. And then maybe another one. Along the way there will be missteps, absolutely, but they will be so small and so focused that you will learn from them quickly and you will be able to correct quickly. And you will come back to that customer. You will find yourself in this scenario. What we like to tell people is, do not build the future. Instead, build the next thing that people really want. Now do that over and over again, and the future will find you. Go back to your 5-year plan from 5 years ago. Maybe dust it off, and then have a good laugh. That will help you get the courage to try this. Because you'll say, man, we were kind of naive. We were stupid, actually. And the iPad hadn't even been invented yet, so of course we were off. I guarantee you, you're not going to know what's going to happen 5 years from now. But if you do this for 5 years, 5 years from now, you'll be standing on top of exactly what customer experience your customer wants. Now, this is not necessarily easy to do. So we'll spend some time in the workshop later on working on it. But the outcome of doing this is that you deliver total product experiences. Now, it's a little unfair of me to come into a room where people always think about experience all the time and say, guess what? I'm going to use the word experience in yet a different context. But I'm going to. Because I think designing amazing user interfaces or user experience, that's all great. But if you don't have in mind what that total product envelope experience is like, that you are wrapping around your customer, that you are enfolding them in this experience, chances are good you will misdesign more than a few things along the way. So let me explain what this is. First, with a definition. Total product experience. These are experiences that go beyond traditional product boundaries. I'll illustrate that in a moment. They usually lead you to new platforms, and that can mean new devices, during new moments of people's lives that you previously didn't have access to them. So for example, the bank that now can reach me in my pocket if they do a good job couldn't have done that before. That's a new moment and a new device. The goal being it leads to a deeper and more measurable customer engagement that hopefully satisfies. This becomes the end goal of every digital disruption effort that will ever happen from now on. Simply adding a technology to your current process and saying that's cool because the CEO maybe said we have to add an app, we have to be on the iPad, okay, is not sufficient if it doesn't do this. Because trust me, someone else is going to do this. And let me illustrate that. So this is an example of a young woman getting ready for a date on a Friday night. Well, it's not a date. She's going to hang out with some friends, but Carlos is going to be there and she knows it. So she's really interested in making a good impression. That's what she needs right now, at a very basic level. Now, you can define that as she wants the confidence that comes from looking good or feeling good about herself. Fine. However you define that, those are her needs in that moment. Now, if you were in the health and beauty category, selling product, you really had no influence here. You either, because of your traditional product boundaries, had already sold her the products and she already knew how to use them, or you didn't and she doesn't. That's basically it. In this scenario, however, because she's a digitally disrupted consumer, that's not a mirror. That's a display. She's able to say to the display, magic mirror, and up comes the app. And it takes maybe a digital still of her, or probably it's just a live mapping of her actual face in 3D on the screen. And through some combination of touch and gesture and voice, she's able to maybe apply mascara or ask the computer to do a makeover on her. She is able to get a couple of looks that she's interested in, possibly. And in the event that she finds one she likes, and I'm not very good at Photoshop, I'm not one of you, so this is just a different picture. She finds a look she likes, what does she need next? She needs to share that with her friend, so she's going to say, call Carrie. And of course, this whole system is going to be tied into her Facebook, or maybe her LO, I don't know. And she's going to say, call Carrie. Carrie's going to get a message on her phone. This is the look I'm going for. Is it a thumb up? Is it a no? Carrie might call her right back and say, girl, you don't even think it. I don't know. That'll be up to them. The tools that I give them will help them decide to get what they want. But the whole point is, this expanded product experience changes forever what it means to interact with mascara, hair care products, even the digital closet that she walks into afterward, and it gives her suggestions on how to dress, knowing what clothes she already has in her closet. All of that stuff. Then the question becomes, whose expanded product experience is this? For which companies is the magic mirror an adjacent product experience? Well, let's think. You could have the Media companies who have the content. 17 wants to be there. Cosmo wants to be there. As the parent of the girl in the picture, I do not want Cosmo to be there. But that's a separate conversation. Retailers who sell these products obviously want to be there. So it's no surprise that Sephora has already built iPad apps that do half of this stuff. Of course, the people who make those products would much rather have that direct digital customer relationship for the first time in their history. So the manufacturers want that relationship and want to be in that mirror. And this explains why just in April, L'Oreal announced its own Makeup Genius app. An iPad app that does, again, half of this stuff. Now, of course, there's also a whole new category of company that we call digital platforms. This is Apple, Google, Amazon, possibly Facebook, possibly Microsoft. Could you imagine Amazon putting the Kindle Mirror in your bathroom? They sell all of that stuff. Then you realize they don't even have to put the Kindle Mirror in your bathroom if they get you to put a Kindle tablet. Have you ever wondered why they've been dropping the price on those Kindle Fire tablets like crazy? So these companies now, all of them are looking at their own expanded total customer experience and thinking, wait a minute, we're going to overlap with all these other guys here really quickly, aren't we? So that leads to promiscuous partnership in some cases. L'Oreal's app, for example, is in partnership with a bunch of magazines. But it also leads to direct competition down the road. Who has this relationship and who has permission to do with that relationship something that expands their business even more? It's going to be a very important part of this. In the end, whoever holds that customer relationship, whoever consistently delights that customer, will win. Now, I make it sound like it's a do it once, stand on the mountain, plant your flag, and then you're done. Obviously, that's not the case. This is a continual process. There's plenty of interesting examples to look at as we're imagining where else there might be another opportunity for someone else to come along and provide a better, richer total product experience. It might be something like someday Oculus VR. Now, I've written a lot about this topic. I won't go into it all right now, but it's one to watch. Speaking of watch, Apple Watch. What's that experience going to be like? And for whom? And how will it provide even more gates for Apple to control how your customer connects to you? We have Jibo. Anyone ever seen this? Personal robot. I'm waiting for mine. It should be arriving in February. Now, does it move? No, it doesn't. It's just a voice interface that lives in your kitchen or anywhere else in your home, and you ask it things and it tells you things and it interacts with your other devices. Now, all three of these things are happening right now. They've been announced, they're being tested, they're being deployed. Oculus just had its most recent developer conference and people came away amazed at what the technology is doing. But James, you said digital disruption is so cheap and easy that everyone can do it. But this is massive amounts of money that people are pouring into this. Oculus was bought by Facebook for billions. Jibo hasn't been bought by anybody yet, but probably will be. Where do we play in any of this? Well, here's what's cool about this technology. You don't have to wait for a digital mirror or any of these other things to start designing these experiences. As I already told you in the digital magic mirror example, most of these companies are just using the iPad to build a facsimile of what eventually will be built into the mirror. The same is possible with all of these. So while someday we have these, today we have this, Google Cardboard. I was so going to bring mine with me here. I apologize, I left it home. This particular version of Google Cardboard is made by Dodo Case, the people who make those quite exquisite phone and tablet cases. Dodo Case makes this little kit. It's $25. I think everyone should get one. A couple of lenses. It takes a little while to assemble and tape it all together. You stick your phone in the front and you download virtual reality apps and you can have virtual reality experiences. Now, you can get incredibly nauseated doing this because these devices are not optimized. I mean, that's the reason why Oculus is spending billions to get it right. Because if it's the moment you go like this and the visual display lags by half a second and your stomach says, I can't do that. But it's worth a test. For $25, it's definitely worth a test. Now we also have Pebble Watch. Every single thing except for Apple Pay that's built into the Apple Watch, there's some approximation of on the Pebble. I used to brag about my Pebble. I don't have it on me right now. I've got the Moto 360 instead. It's not as good as the Pebble, because the Pebble's been out there for a couple of years. It's on version 4 already. It's got really good developers building amazing experiences for it. And then the apps on your phone that make it work well together. The 360 will get there, and obviously Apple Watch will get there probably before it's even released. That's the way Apple works. Now, we don't have to wait for a little voice-operated robot to sit in your kitchen before we can just say, Siri, or OK Google, or whatever. Now my watch is going to wake up. Shh, go back to sleep. We can do all this today. We can experiment with it as users, and we can start to envision what this would look like if we were to design for some combination of these things, because most of these things will be used in combination. You can't really touch your touch screen while it's mounted in a heads-up display. So you have to be able to speak to it. So you can see these things are going to start really working together very, very quickly. And you can start experimenting now with all of these technologies. Here's an example that I love, which is Oral-B making a toothbrush that in 2011 I said someone was going to someday make. And so I'm really glad that they made it, because it makes me sound prophetic. It's called the Oral-B Smart Series. This toothbrush has accelerometers in it, a Bluetooth radio in it. It's able to measure the direction and angle and force that you apply when you brush your teeth. It can then display all of that for you so that you know how much time you spent on different parts of your mouth. It can then suggest ways to improve how you brush. Now, I personally could care less for that level of information about me. But I've got a whole bunch of kids whose teeth are costing me my life savings. If I could tie their allowance to this, I might do this. And then if I could just push a button to, anyway. This comes with an app that then communicates back to you about your brushing efficiency and behavior, and communicates it potentially to your oral care specialist, your dentist, perhaps your insurance company. I hate to be a bummer, but that's very likely where this is going to go. All of this stuff, we are inventing from scratch what those digital experiences are going to look like. And nothing personal, but I have a nagging doubt that Oral-B is the company that's really going to nail this right on the first time. And as I've seen the screenshots, I haven't used the app. As I've seen the screenshots, I'm pretty confirmed that a bunch of engineers got together and said, what information do we need to pack into this screen? All right, put it in there. So we have dozens of experience points to design for here, just in the teeth. Not to mention in all these other devices on our ears. And when we get Siri in our ears, you wonder why Apple bought Beats? There's going to be a Siri earbud. You're going to talk to Siri like she was just living in your head. That's a scary thought on its own. The point is, there are experience points that are going to be developed and designed by somebody. Some of them will hit it out of the park. Those are the ones that will be most likely to collect all the benefits of digital disruption very, very quickly. We do not have to wait for 3M or Xerox or some company that's spending billions in R&D to make this work. And that's what's really exciting about digital disruption. Okay, so the disruptor who gets there first is the one who sees the customer need as it experiences today, as it is experienced today. So not, do you want to stay with the cat lady in Pomona, but how conveniently can we give you the best range of options to choose from and guidance on which option to choose from, where to stay. That's today's need. Then how do we comprehend the experience in its totality? It's about getting confidence in what you're going to choose. It's about having all the steps given to you, about making sure you know how to pay and what to do when you're in someone's home and they have lots of cats crawling around. How will you then see what that could look like next? If you've been curious as to why Uber's valuation has been so high lately, it's because people are starting to catch on. This is not about taxis. This is about transportation. The tens of millions of driving hours and the hundreds of millions of underutilized vehicles around the world. So you have to be able to foresee that expansion. And then you need to start designing today with that next thing in mind. Okay, if we were to give people a fraction of that experience today on the devices they currently have, what would that look like? How would that feel? In the case of the founders of Airbnb, one of the most interesting things that they do is not just obsess about the technology, they do, but their founder actually travels 1 month out of every year on Airbnb, so that he has a full picture of every single piece of the journey. Finding the right place to stay, booking the right place to stay, getting connected to the host, experiencing the host site, reviewing the host site, all of it. That's a total product experience. This is not just about building a web tool. This is a total product experience. Now, the spoils in all of this exercise will go to whoever can disrupt. Remember I said in the beginning, the old excuses of we can't disrupt because no one will do this, gone. It'll cost too much to do, falling rapidly. It's that we don't know how to do it, and this ends up being the truth. So in order to do this, to expand the experience of the product, you have to have a disruptor's energy, skills, and policies. This one turns out to be difficult, as I'll show you here in a moment. So we did a survey, a global survey of executives to see if they're ready for this. And in the book there's a chapter where we blow out all the data and give you a lot of interesting comparisons. I'll share with you just a couple of data points. 4. People do see this coming. They know that digital is going to change their industry, but they aren't ready. And here's how. First of all, do you believe that digital is going to change your industry? We had to set that baseline because we still had people in certain industries, in particular heavy industries, saying, well, that's fine and good for iPhone things, but not for us. Well, then we went out and did the survey. It turns out 89% of people agree. This is going to change our industry. And I've had some fascinating conversations with people in the cement business, in the oil and gas exploration business. These are businesses I have no right to opine on at all. And yet when their executives come to me and say, here's what I want you to understand about how my industry is going to change, I am blown away. Blown away at the opportunities for digital to change fundamentally their process and their product. So, good news is everyone knows digital is going to happen to them, not just in general, but to them. All right, are we excited about it? People in our company are excited. 65% say yes. Woohoo, that's a victory. I wasn't sure we were going to get that high of a number. That's 2/3. Now let's talk about skills. Do you have the skills that you need in order to take advantage of this opportunity? 38% said yes. Now, I expected that. And when I shared this number with the executive of a large luxury goods maker in Paris, and he stopped me right there and he said, that's our problem. We need to fix the skills. We need to train people. We need to hire the right people. I said, that's all well and good, and it's true. You do need those things, but I guarantee you that's not your number one problem. Your number one problem is the policies and practices that will enable you to use the skills that you've got to take advantage of the excitement that you feel in the face of something you know is coming. And that's where it gets really despairing, because only 32% of people believe they have the right policies and practices. Now actually 32 isn't terrible. It's 1/3. You know, as demography goes, that's not bad. Except when we separate those answers by people who are vice presidents or above, and the people who work for them, it gets much less encouraging than 32%. Vice presidents and above, when asked the same question, 49% of them say, we got this. We have these policies. I have an iPad. I totally know what's going down here. And by the way, I made these policies, so of course they're good. Then you ask the people that work for them. Does your company have the policies and practices in place that will allow you to take advantage of digital? 24% say yes. That's the bigger gap. That's the gap that's going to kill you. Because the people who need to actually carry out those policies are the ones who know whether the policies are right or not. Now, if they're just being cynical and negative, where do you think they got the idea that being cynical and negative was the right solution to your corporate politics? I wonder. These are big issues. It's culture, it's process. A lot of my research since the book has been focused on how do we identify the cultural, structural barriers that are standing in the way of this kind of policy change. But the exciting thing is, I have never shared this with an executive who hasn't then said, you know, you're right, that is our problem. Me standing up at a company meeting, I had a CEO say this to me, so me standing up at a company meeting and saying, we're going to have the best digital initiative in the industry, probably doesn't mean much, does it? I said, no. Especially because your industry is such a laggard that everyone's going to go, oh yeah, that's an excuse. He said, we're going to have the best in the industry. Keep the bar low there, CEO. When you think as a digital disruptor, you think of the bank but you don't think like a bank. And you say, what would Square Cash do to us? Now that PayPal's going to be on its own, what would they do to us? What will Apple do to us after it convinces us to give off 1.5 basis points every time someone uses their watch to pay for a transaction? That's the way you think as a digital disruptor. And the best way to do that is to stop thinking about them at all and just put yourself in your customer's shoes. What is it that they need next? How quickly could I build it or test it so that I can give them the experience that they're craving? That is really the best, clearest guideline for you to follow in order to build the total product experience that your customers want. Okay. My urging to everyone out there, in this room certainly, but you're already here because you're someone who wants to do this. So if you are able to not only release the disruptor in yourself, but encourage your colleagues, your clients, whoever they might be, to see themselves as people standing in the middle of an opportunity, right side by side with their customer, stepping forward into some adjacent possibilities together, as opposed to crafting an experience that you're going to do to that customer. You are instead joining with that customer and moving forward with that customer. Suddenly you see all kinds of new possibilities. And that's very exciting. So in the time that you have here today, I hope that you keep this in mind. How are we going to design total product experiences that will release not only the disruptor in our organization, but the disruptive impulse in our customer, bring them together, and end up having changed the future? With that, I thank you very, very much. Have a good rest of the day.